I think we'll get started and carry on. Mm, okay. The basic thing to realize is that we are doing the modern period, and while doing the modern period, we are trying to find answers for why it is called the modern period of human history, though it is technically European history, uh, but it is in the modern period. I told you that we now have a changing of uh, terminology of the dating system. Uh, Previously, it was called before Christ, and then it was called Anno Domino. Um, or is it Anno Domini? Yeah. And that indicated the death of Christ. So, um, so what I'm trying to tell you is that because people didn't really want the whole notion of what we call, since people really didn't want the Christian notion becoming a universal dating, they changed the dating system now to CE, not the dating system. The system is the same. The terminology, it is now called CE and BCE. CE stands for Common Era, and BCE stands for Before Common Era. Um, there are problems with this, very big problems. How did this become Common Era from the first century? Okay, how did it become the Common Era? Was there a world history from the time that we call the first century CE? There wasn't. There wasn't any Common Era. Old civilizations like China and India followed their own patterns of calendars. They followed these things, and there was nothing in common at that particular point. And now there's nothing in common then. So when did the Common Era really set in? If you must understand the setting in of the Common Era, It happened in the modern period, that too not in the beginnings of the modern period, but as the modern period uh, matured, and when colonialism spread to all parts of the world and included the discovery of new lands like the like the North American continent, the South American continent, um, Australia, and with obviously when you talk about Australia, you also talk about New Zealand. So if you basically talk about a common era, so to speak, it seems as if the common era is not something that existed from the first century. The common era probably starts only in the 17th century. So there should have been a total overhauling of the there should have been a total overhauling of the dating system, but that kind of overhauling of the dating system would essentially mean that everything would go haywire. So they just replaced AD with CE and BC with BCE. But don't let that fool you into believing that the common era started in the first century CE. It didn't. It only started somewhere around the 17th, maybe even the 18th century. That's when the common era started. And the modern period itself, sorry, uh, many people have many ideas about the modern period. The modern period is, according to some people, something that began in the 15th century. And some people it began with Machiavelli. For others, it began a little later, 16th, 17th century. And this distinction about when it began and what it became over time is an absolutely important distinction, because the modern period doesn't have one phase. There are different phases of the modern period which are marked for us students of social sciences. Mm, I would prefer if you ask me this as a doubt. Tell me what happened in India and the world before the 17th century.
I meant there was monarchy, there was king's rule, the Mughal rule, the Britishers, 1600, all that period. Why that can't be counted as common era?
The Mughal rule, why would it be counted as common era? Because if you take the period that is actually called medieval period in Europe, and if that is something that is associated with the rise of Christendom, the Indian medieval period actually is something that is associated with the rise of Islamic rulers in the country. More and more Islamic rulers. It's not just the Mughal period. Before the Mughals, you had the slave dynasty, Qutbuddin Aibak, and then you had the Khaljis, whom we used to call the Khiljis at one time. So we have those people. Um, all
Tughlaq,
the Tughlaq,
Sayyid
yeah,
Lodi,
huh?
Sayyid dynasty, Lodi dynasty.
Lodi, yes. That is the Delhi Sultanate you're talking about. Uh, we had 400 years plus ago, we had the Qutub Shahis here, um, and then we had the Asaf Jahis, and then there were all these Bahmani sultans, um, and you had rulers like Tipu Sultan, you had rulers like Sirajud-Dawla. The presence of the British as a colonial power was something that happened only in the modern period. And before that, people came to India, and what was their intent? The intent was to find a market and to trade. That is there when the modern period begins in Europe. The Silk Route, which got divided into two, uh, meaning it had two prongs. Up till one point, it had only one prong, and then it had two prongs. And if you look at that Silk Route, um, you will find that one prong came into India, the subcontinent, through the Khyber Pass, and the other went through Mongolia, the Gobi Desert, and went to China. So the Silk Route served both India and China. Marco Polo used this route. He came to India. Travelers did. Businessmen did. Marco Polo was not a traveler, though he maintained a travelogue. Marco Polo is somebody who was a trader. And today we all eat Italian pasta. Okay, and there are different kinds of Italian pasta like macaroni, spaghetti. There are different kinds of them. Vermicelli. Uh, but where did pasta emanate? Not in Italy. Not in Italy. It was noodles from China. that Marco Polo took back because he was a merchant. He went and sold those noodles uh, back in Italy, and that's how the Italians uh, tried to make noodles of their own. The closest they came was with spaghetti. The others, macaroni and vermicelli, was slightly more, uh, what should I say? They didn't completely reflect the food that is noodles. Condiments, spices, all those things went from India. And even there is, of course, a bit of a controversy if the whole idea of a kite, flying of kites, was something that started in China, or did it start in India? Because there is a great deal of difference in the way in which kites are made in China and the way kites are made in India. People attribute, again, most of this is history as written by Western um, merchants and merchants who maintained travelogues. They basically say that it started in China. That is because paper, as such, is supposed to have started, was supposed to have been invented in China, the making of paper. But there are other theories as well. Some people say it's not, it has nothing to do with China. You have the whole thing about how the name paper came. It came from Egypt and from the extract of the plant, which is actually called the papyrus. 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 So it's a question mark. Did China, or was China the first country to make paper? Maybe they made paper currency. Otherwise, it was metal everywhere. And since papyrus is something which is uh, indigenous, absolutely indigenous to Egypt, uh, are we overlooking the fact that it is perhaps in Egypt that paper was invented? So that is one question. The existence of travelers, businessmen, maintenance of travelogues are all not mainstream events. They are not all mainstream events. Mainstream events are those which have changed the face of the world with Western institutions of governance, Western institutions of ruling, Western codified systems of legality, all these coming into the rest of the going to rather to the whole world and taking root in different parts of the world. So that is when you would really say it is a common era. The colonial period, the initial colonial period, well, there's no common era as such, because the initial colonial period, it was under the rule of the British East India Company. If you really ask me, if you really ask me, I would say that we became a proper British colony only from 1858 onwards, when the country, the territory called India, came under the direct rule of the Crown of England. So it's only after the failure of the Great Revolt of 1857 that we find that there is, what should I say, uh, there is a direct involvement of the Crown of England in the ruling of India, and it was no longer the British East India Company that ruled. And that is why the Governor General designation was removed, and we have the whole idea of a viceroyalty. Okay, a viceroyalty basically meant that the crown would basically take over the ruling of the country. So India had travelers from different parts of the world. I did mention Al-Biruni. Al-Biruni talked about what a rich and prosperous nation India was. And there were even Chinese travelers like Fahian, Hyun-sang, and there were travelers who came even earlier than that to India, and they were stunned by what they saw in the southern part of India, especially in the Chola period. And please remember that India was a colonial power, at least the Cholas were a colonial power. They managed to create Simhapuri, which is Singapore. Uh, they managed to occupy um, tracts of Thailand. They occupied tracts of Thailand, and they occupied um, probably most of the uh, islands that constitute the Indonesian archipelago. Sumatra is supposed to be an Indian name given as an Indian. Some of them were local language, Java, for example. So, yeah, India did, it's not like there's only one-way traffic. India also colonized, especially from the southern side. And there was on the eastern side, southeastern side, there was colonization done by South Indian empires especially the Cholas, they did that. Don't believe all those stupid WhatsApp forwards which will tell you that India never attacked any country. If there was no India to attack any country, it was some 500 odd kingdoms. So they all fought each other. Some of the more ambitious ones built powerful navies. They built powerful navies. And Dwaraka, which is now submerged in somewhere around Gujarat. This particular place also, which was supposed to be the uh, capital of the Yadu dynasty, from which the Yadava comes, and Govinda Shauri, that is the name of the deity that we call Krishna. And I told you that story that his name is not Krishna. In the Mahabharata, the two people whose names are Krishna are Krishna Dvaipayana, the also called the Veda Vyasa. Veda Vyasa, he is called because he arranged the Vedas into those 4 sets. That's what one story tells us. Another story tells us that, it shows different phases of where the Aryans were. So we don't know if the Mahabharata is a fictitious thing or if it is a thing that really happened. But there is a Veda Vyasa whose name is Krishna Dvaipayana. Draupadi's real name is Krishna. And both these names have been used because these people were dusky in their appearance. They had a dusky skin. They weren't fair like the Aryans. In fact, Krishna Dvaipayana is often described as a very ugly looking man. And Krishna basically means that which is dark or dusky. And the river Krishna got its name because of the fact the water of the river looks dark. It doesn't look light. It looks very dark. So that is the reason why it got the name Krishna. And Krishna, written like this, is dusky, dark in appearance, but when we talk about Govinda Shauri of the Yadu dynasty, It is from Yadu that Yadava comes. Okay, Yadu dynasty. He was supposed to be an incarnation you have to put two dots, one dot under S and two dots over N, and read that as Visnunu. Visnunu. That's how you're supposed to read. And what is Visnunu? Visnunu is the uh, all permeating spirit. The incarnation of Vishnu is again the dot under an S, under the S, and two dots on the N to produce the na sound and not the na sound. So it was Krishna. He was Govinda Shauri, was called Krishna because he is supposed to be, which is again the same, which has the exact same meaning of, what should I say, of Vishnu, which is the all permeating spirit of the universe. So the commonly held notion that idolatry began with this whole thing called Sanatana Dharma is not very true. Idolatry came much later, but let's not get into those points. Now, the point that I'm trying to make is Govinda Shauri was again Govinda Shauri and his brother Balarama. Uh, they were great warriors, and they too had a navy. They too had a navy, and they went in the western side. Okay, they went on a rampage of conquering on the western side towards Arabia, and the Yadus um, colonized the Khurasan region, which is the buffer between the Indian subcontinent which is the buffer between the Indian subcontinent and what people today call Central Asia. They even colonized parts of Persia. This is originally pronounced as Persia or Persis. This is way before Islam happened. And so if you look at, have you heard this name, Rudra?
Yes, sir.
Any idea who Rudra is?
Another name of Lord Shiva.
Another name of Lord Shiva. Akshay Pantulu,
Sir,
do you know Rudra?
Rudra.
Or is your argument Nen Hindu Netlaita? Hmm?
Shiva is correct, sir.
Shiva is correct.
Yes, sir.
So you endorse Madam Padma.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Both of you are terribly, terribly wrong. Rudra is a character who is supposed to have reigned in the region which is Khorasan, Persia or Persis. He reigned there, Rudra. And it is actually not Shiva, it is Shiva. S dot below IVA. Shiva, also called Shankara, again with a S dot below it. Shankara. So the spellings are these. Let me put them in the bracket. So has that dot underneath, and the A has a line above. The last A in the case of Shankara, and the only A in the case of Shiva. That's his name. Shiva or Shankara. Shankara. Shiva or Shankara, that's how you produce, is a Tibetan. S with a dot again at the bottom. Again, Manasarovar. It is in Sanskrit Manasarovara or Manasarovaram. It's not Manasarovar. Anyway, so that was his origins. So Shiva and Rudra are not the same characters. People believe he's a Rudra reincarnate. That is the belief of the people. Okay, that Shiva is a Rudra reincarnate. Shiva and Rudra are not the same people. They're two different persons. And Shiva came from Mount Kailasa and the Manasarovara region into India for various reasons, of which I'm not totally aware of. I know of some, but I don't want to make this a class in Indian, this thing. What I'm trying to tell you is in the West, we have gone all the way. Some people say even areas of Arabia were conquered by the Yadu dynasty. That is not beyond the scope of reality, but I have not seen concrete evidence of it. But the Khurasan and the Central Asian regions uh, and parts of Iran, which are called Persia or Perses, these were all ruled by the Yadus and Rudra, who was Rudra is supposed to have invaded from the land, and the Yadus had a very powerful navy, a story that very few people know. They had a very, very powerful navy. They were a seafaring kingdom, and they ruled parts of Central Asia. They ruled, people say, Arabia. And like I said, it is not beyond, it's not beyond the realm of the possible. It is quite possible. So that is something that you cannot deny. You cannot deny that. Hey, shut up. Mm. You cannot deny that. So you have people having gone east. People have gone east, right up to Indonesia, Thailand, Singapore. They've gone that far. And here, they've gone to the west as a seafaring nation. And Rudra was the one who went by land, who went by land. So the question then is why should we take the common era? This is my question to you, madam. Why should we take the common era as something that started with the Christians? I know I'm sounding like a right-wing historian, but I'm not. I'm asking you a question which is purely logical. Purely logical. And if you put together the argument, these two arguments, along with the argument I keep telling you, I am an idiot, I do not know where I put that article by one of the ex Chief Justices of the Indian Supreme Court, who said what the United States of America is today, India was many, many centuries ago. It was a land which welcomed a lot of people. It was also a land that went and conquered other lands. So don't go by that rubbish thing that we never attacked any country. Where was India? Till 1947, India was only a geographical entity, possibly a cultural entity, certainly not a political entity. And when I say political, whatever was the equivalent of that, the monarchies that you talked about, those, where is the Mughals came? Yes, they did come here. So, do you take the Mughal invasion of India or the setting up of the Delhi Sultanate as a process of globalization? And therefore, do we say that this is the common era? And compared to the Mughals, what the Cholas, the Yadus, what all of them did seems to be far, far more in terms of number of territories conquered. How did Andaman and Nicobar become Indian islands? You know how far they are from India, right? That is because the Cholas conquered them. The Cholas had conquered them, and since then they've been with India. They've been with India. Sri Lanka was conquered by the Cholas. That's how the Tamils in Sri Lanka ended up. Not the plantation workers that um, were taken by the British. What those who are today considered to be native Tamils of Sri Lanka went there thanks to the Cholas and to a certain extent the Pallavas. So that is a common era in itself, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
So, but the problem is that these are not all seen as globalization because you don't have institutions of governance being set in place. So this common era, before common era, actually is an unnecessary exercise if you ask me. If you seriously ask me, it is an unnecessary exercise. Why are we trying to say that we shouldn't follow a Christian calendar when what we do on a daily basis is a Christian way of life? Hmm. When what we do on a daily basis is a Christian way of life. This whole thing about Sunday, second Saturday, all these things, later on, of course, the Saturdays, they are all Christian ways of life. No Christian is ruling us. No Christian is ruling us. So why are we still following these? So I seriously don't know what was wrong with calling this Anno Domini and before Christ. Okay, you people made that calendar thanks to the Industrial Revolution, and all you were able to conquer the entire world. Spain and Britain had two of the most powerful navies in the world. It was originally the Spanish Navy, which was considered to be the most powerful navy, and it was called the. Does anyone know what it was called? The Spanish Navy? No? Nobody knows what it was called? The Spanish Navy was called the Armada. 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 Actually, that's the pronunciation. It was considered to be the most powerful navy until they got defeated by the British. Until they got defeated by the British. And so conveniently, they went to South America and set up their colonies there. And I told you, you should read that book, Ascent of Money by Niall Ferguson, which will tell you the wonderful story about how money came into being. It'll tell you the story of how first the Spaniards thought silver would be that particular metal which would increase the value of their money. So they went and plundered the whole of Central America, where there was a lot of silver. They went there and plundered it. They built huge reserves of silver, which they still have, by the way. And then this small little island of shopkeepers, as it is called, played a trick on them. They went and mined gold. They mined gold. And why is India so important in the whole scheme of the British Empire? India is so important because most of the gold came from India. Most of it. It came from India. They looted India and they said, "You have silver? Too bad. We have gold." And the Spanish currency lost its value. Till today, till today, the world's most, I don't know how to put it, you can't call it expensive, the world's most powerful in terms of the value of the currency is the pound sterling. Despite the abolition of the gold standard by Nixon, I have talked to you about that, by President Nixon, you had the abandoning of the gold standard. But despite that, it's the British whose currency is the most powerful. It's not the dollar, it's not the euro. On the one hand, we say euro, I mean, most of the European countries are collapsing, which is true. They are collapsing, but they still retain the value of their currency. The euro is more valuable in terms of its worth than even the dollar. So that then is the question. So why have this common era thing? Okay, we'll have it if that's what people want us to do, we'll do it. But I just wanted to, this is, you see, I have several bees in my bonnet. Okay. I'm the very argumentative sort, extremely argumentative. And since I'm so argumentative, uh, I always think about, I don't accept anything without thinking about it. Without thinking about it, I don't accept anything. And when I think about it, there is no sanctity to that common era. That common era is definitely not before 17th century, but probably in reality, if you want, what is the common era? The adoption of institutions and all that will be the 19th century. But we can say that the laws pertaining to travel on seas, the high seas, anyone who knows what the high seas are? Anyone? High seas. What, Akshay? No?
No, no, sir.
Hmm. High seas are the equivalent of highways. On the roads, they are called highways. On the seas, the sea routes are not arbitrary. There are very, very properly followed routes, or what the American call routes. So, um, high seas, the laws of high seas were all drafted by the Europeans around the 17th century. So that we can say is the beginning of the common era. But really, I don't see any great merit in calling it the common era. Some people will tell you the modern period is the real common era, which is not very true. Which is not very true. The times of Hobbes, the times of Locke, they are not the beginning of the common era, but they are modern period in European history. In European history. In fact, I have a very radical argument. I'll say that our modern period is after we gained independence, and probably from the 1990s when we went in the route of liberalization. That is probably our real modern period. Our real modern period. Because our institutions of governance stopped behaving like post-colonial institutions. The state is looking less and less like the post-colonial state. It's taking on the dimensions of the Westphalian state. So, but don't take this too seriously. It's an untested argument. But hopefully, I've got 3 books. I have 3 books to publish, almost complete. And after that, I want to write 3 more books. Let's see if I'll ever get around to writing them. Anyway, so what we need to understand, therefore, is this whole common era thing. I accept your challenge, Madam Padma Garu. I accept that. It's a good challenge that you put forward.
No, sir, I just had that small
No,
doubt.
no,
Why shouldn't we call?
it's not a small doubt. It's a challenge. You've challenged the idea.
Okay.
I like that. I'm appreciating it. Why are you like trying to say it's a small doubt? It's a pretty big challenge and a good one at that. And a good one at that. It shows the loopholes. It shows the loopholes and it shows how history is never written properly. It is the powerful who write the history.
Right.
Yeah, so the subaltern historians have a point when they say all history is written by the superordinated classes. There is no doubt about that. There is no doubt about that. A lot of history of really great people who should be venerated, perhaps, that history goes unknown. It becomes unknown. David Arnold was so right when he said Alluri Sita Ramaraju was not a nationalist. He was not a nationalist. He wanted his own little kingdom. He was a Telugu speaking man who went and, you know, uh, became the ruler of these tribal areas which today are called Rampachodavaram in the East Godavari district. But otherwise, they are two different areas. Rampa is one area and Chodavaram is another area. And this is where the Adivasis were. He Teluguized them. He Teluguized them. He ruled them. And that's why he called himself Raju. Where does the surname Raju come? These are people who were once those who claim that they are people who are Rajus, who were Rajus, and Telangana Yodhas like Akshay Puneet Podishetty believe that we are now being ruled by the sons of the soil. Right, Akshay?
I didn't understand, sir.
You were a Telangana Yodha, no? Separate Telangana. Hmm? You wanted a separate Telangana. No
I
Andhra.
didn't.
You didn't?
Yes, sir.
Don't say it loudly. You'll be thrown out of the university. Hmm? All the Telangana people who fought for separate Telangana, who is ruling us today? KCR's family. The car is now full of his family. And where did they come from? They came from Bobbili, Vijayanagaram, Parvatipuram, North Coastal Andhra Pradesh. These are people who came from there. And they say they are sons of the soil. Really? That's not true. That is absolutely not true. And there is no sons of the soil anywhere anyway. And I will discuss that in Cosmopolitanism of Jeremy Waldron, Jeremy Waldron's Cosmopolitanism. I will talk about that, where he says there are in the world, it is impossible for you to tie a community down to a geography. And it is impossible to tie an individual down to a community. And by extension, to a geography. God bless him. Otherwise, the world will become a very, very divisive place. Very, very divisive place. It helps that he is actually somebody who studied jurisprudence, and most of his political writing is that which is informed by his jurisprudence. So let's get back to the modern period. As it is, we have two angry young ladies, Padma Navanand Garu and Kirti Garu, who think this man comes every morning, early in the morning, and starts spewing. God only knows. I know what you call it, but I can't tell you that. Hmm? So let's get back to the modern period. The modern period has phases. The first phase is that when okay, so we are talking about the first phase, which is the phase called uh, mercantile capitalism. This is when people were coming to the Orient, and by the Orient, we mean at that time it was India and China mainly. These two were the Orient. See, it is a matter of convenience. It is a matter of what is important to you. It is a matter of who you're dealing with that makes you give names to collectives. So when you're talking about the Orient, for the Europeans, the Orient was India and China, mainly. Mainly India and China. And they were very wary of the Mongol marauders if they went to China. They preferred coming to India because India was a little more prosperous than China, and you could escape the Mongols, which you couldn't if you went to China. Okay, who has heard of this name?
Yes, sir. I have heard.
Who is he?
Ruler of China attacked India.
Ruler of China.
Turrebaji Khan. He is also called as Turrebaji Khan.
Turrebaz Khan is in Hyderabad. What is this? Huh?
Rohingya.
No, 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 no.
Mongol, sir. He was a Mongol.
He was a
Turebaj
Mongol.
Khan, he
Turre,
attacked the court.
he didn't attack the court. He attacked Koti.
Koti means
Mm.
residents of the Britishers.
Yes, that is Turrebaz Khan.
Uh,
And it is from that we have this Hyderabadi expression. If somebody thinks too much of himself, we say, if somebody thinks too much of himself, we say, Turum Khan soch raha hai. So that Turum Khan, somebody needs to mute their mic. Yeah, thank you. Turum Khan is a direct derivation of Turrebaz Khan. Okay, now this is the latest spelling of the Mongol marauder who did attack India. The other spelling that you find is Genghis Khan. The British, I think, used to call him Genghis Khan. The Americans started calling him Genghis Khan, and then it became Genghis Khan. What was his real name? Was he a Khan? Khans are Pathans. Hmm? Did you know that? Not everybody is a Khan. Khans are Pathans. People write Khan now, but not all people are Khans. Khans are Pathans. So why did this man have this name? Anyone? His name actually was, imagine a line on top of the sea. You should technically imagine a line on top of the sea because that becomes cha. That's called phonetic writing. But since we can't put that, we put this. So since we put that H here, we put this. His name was Genghis Chan. What is Chan? Apart from the um, signification of the Sanskrit word dhyana, which became Chan. Chan is another thing. Does anyone know what it is?
Does that mean shine?
No. It is the name of the dynasty. Even though the Mongols were marauders, they became marauders because they were living in a desert area. But they had kings, and Genghis Chan,
Sir, what is meant by marauders?
um,
What is its spelling?
doing that only. That's what marauders are. Okay. Does
Okay,
it
sir.
satisfy you?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Fully satisfied.
Thank you. So Chan is a dynasty. Okay. And the British, I wish if it was with a pen, I mean, if we had a chalk, I could. The problem with this is there is no way in which one can go back to the tool which is with which you can draw. So let's try something. Worked. Wonderful. No. Why did this come here? Okay. This is not happening. Why is it becoming a zero? Okay, let's not waste time with that. Just imagine a sea with a line on top. It should have been written like that. Over the years, people stopped writing phonetically like that, as a result of which they wrote just like this. Uh, oh, yeah, I will. Yeah, so if you look at this, um, the top lines, if you remove them, they read this as Genghis Khan. That's how this happened. Genghis Khan, and that transformed into Genghis. Genghis Khan. That's what it became, unfortunately. He was not a Khan, he was not a Pathan. He was of Chinese origin. He was a Chinese man, though he was in Mongolia. Okay, and he came from the Chan dynasty. And the British pronounced it as Khan. Once they stopped writing it with the phonetics. So, as a result of that, we talk about it as Genghis Khan now, but otherwise he's Genghis Khan. Anyway, so these marauders were there, and the Kushan Dynasty, this is just for your information. The Kushan Dynasty were Mongols. I don't know if you know this. Okay, the emperors of the Kushan Dynasty, the most well-known, two well-known uh, emperors of the Kushan dynasty who were Mongols were, you want to say that names, Akshay?
Kanishka.
Hmm?
Kanishka, sir.
Kanishka is one, yes. Who's
They
the other?
belong to Yuchi tribe
Huh?
of Central Asia.
No, no, they were Mongols. They belong to what?
Yuchi tribe.
That is one of the tribes in Mongolia. Okay. Who was the other well-known ruler in
I
the
have
Kush?
to know, sir. I don't know.
Huvishka.
Which
Huvishka. Huvishka. Kanishka and Huvishka. The great thing about the Kushans were that the Kushans were taken in with Indian culture. They were simply mesmerized by the Sanskrit language and the richness of the culture that the language and the country had, and they completely Indianized themselves. Their original names are not Kanishka, Huvishka. Those were the kind of names they took on, and their official language in uh, of their court was Sanskrit. And they tried to go back to Mongolia and civilize people, like people were in India. That is a project of theirs that didn't happen. All right. So Madam Padma has asked me a question, and we'll pick up this mercantile capitalism and Hobbes tomorrow. I don't particularly feel that we have wasted time talking about the dating system, because that is a conversation that people should have. That is really a conversation that people should have. But you don't have a class by Madam Yasmin today. She's going to attend her promotion interview, and she's as nervous as hell. Don't tell anybody that. Hmm. Yeah. So, uh, so what are we looking at then? The question raised by Madam Padma as to how to write and make a presentation. Uh, have you chosen your topics?
No, sir, not
Well,
yet.
when are you supposed to make these presentations?
That also we do not know. Maybe after the second internal.
Yeah. So I just wanted to tell you that you know what has happened. We are all in a bit of a trouble because Madam Yasmin, ably supported by Professor Muslaya.
Sir, recording.
No, that's okay. No problem. Um, they said, start writing your papers. Now we've got instruction that we have to give you assignments, papers as in. We've got instructions that we should give you topics, and you should write assignments on those. That's the latest. We've got a circular to that effect.
Oh no.
Yeah. We've been asked to give topics by a certain date, and we have to post it on the thread. And as you can see, the principal is on the thread. So he'll know whether we posted or not. I have no idea how the head of the department intends to handle this. You are not, I kept telling you, this is not something that you can do whenever you want. You have to wait for official notifications. You have to wait. Now we've got this notification. So you might have to rewrite. Huh? Please be ready.